So now that we have everything set up, let's learn how to create databases, collections, and documents. I'm going to go ahead and open up our terminal here. As you can see, I've got the MongoD server running in another tab, and I'm just going to go ahead and run Mongo to connect to our JavaScript shell. Notice that right away it says we've connected to the test database. We can start by looking at a list of the databases we get by default just by running show DBs. As you can see, we have our local database and our test database. We're going to be creating another database of our own soon, but for now, let's just talk about how to connect to a database. As you can see here, it says that we were connected to the test database. We can connect to a database manually by running the used test command. As you can see here, we've just switched to the DB test. So of course, the general command is just use, and then you put the name of your database after that. So for us, let's go ahead and connect to our new database. We're going to call it bookmarks. So I'm going to say use bookmarks. And now you can see we've switched to the database bookmarks. Now notice that we never actually said we want to create a database called bookmarks. We just said that we want to use it. The interesting thing about MongoDB is that it doesn't actually create databases or collections until we actually start storing documents. So although we now have a database called bookmarks, it's not actually saved or stored anywhere until we actually put some data in it. But what we've done here when we say use bookmarks is set the variable db to be our bookmarks database. As you can see here, db now equals the bookmarks database. And db is the object that we're going to be using to interact with our currently selected database throughout this video course. Now for collections, all we have to do is say db dot and then the name of the collection. So let's say links. Part of our bookmarks database will be a list of the links that we have saved as bookmarks. Now we don't have to create this collection, just like we don't have to create the database. It will just create a new collection by this name if it doesn't already exist. And in fact, we can right away do db.links count, and you can see 0 because even though the links collection doesn't exist yet, it knows that since it doesn't exist, it has 0 documents within it. So let's go ahead and insert a document. db.links.insert. And now, since we're storing our documents as JSON, or the very JSON-like BSON, let's go ahead and put some fields in here. So let's say, first of all, that this link is going to have a title, and we will make that Tuts Plus Premium. Then we can give it a URL, which is just going to be tutsplus.com. We can have a comment on this URL. Let's just say great video courses. And then finally, let's add a few tags. We can have tutorials, and we can have dev as the 2 tags. And finally, let's actually just add a saved on, and we'll just say new date. So that will be the current date. So let me go ahead and hit enter, and notice that we don't get any output, but we have our new prompt here, which means something actually happened. Now what we've just done is created our first document. Like I said, notice that we never created the collection. It was automatically created when we inserted this first document. One of the interesting things to note here about this document that we've inserted is one of our values is actually an array. This is something that we could not do in a relational database. This would require another table for our tags, and since this would be a many-to-many join, it would probably require a third table, something like links tags. And we're going to be talking more about these comparisons with relational databases in future videos, but I just want to point that out as one of the immediately noticeable, really cool features of MongoDB. Okay, so let's go ahead and insert another document. But because this is just JavaScript, remember, we can do this in a JavaScript way. So let's create a variable here called doc, and that's just going to be an empty object literal. So now I can say var doc title equals nettuts, doc.url equals http://net.tutsplus.com. Then we can have doc.comment equals best tutorials on the web. Then let's add a few tags here, and we could say tutorials, web dev, and then finally let's have doc, and we'll say saved on. We'll just have a new date once again, and then let's actually do something a bit different here to show off a few of the other cool features of MongoDB. We're going to say doc.meta equals an object, and then we're going to say doc.meta.browser, and we're just going to say Google Chrome version 24. And doc.meta.os equals Mac OS 10.8.2, for example. Okay, and you can imagine this as just maybe some meta information that we might want to store about a specific document. For example, this bookmark was created on Mac from within Chrome. So now if we look at our document here, you can see it has a title, a URL, a comment, some tags, a date that it was saved on, and a meta object. This is really interesting. Note that we have both an array inside of our object and we have a sub-object inside of our object. I already mentioned the array, but sub-objects as well are something that is allowed and even encouraged inside of a MongoDB database. Now, if you come from a strong relational database background, this is going to kind of not feel right to you. This is going to look denormalized, and in truth, it is. And we're going to talk about denormalization and how that works in MongoDB in another video. But for now, just know that it can be done, and sometimes it is a good idea. So now let's go ahead and put this into our database. Previously, we used db.links.insert. This time, I'm going to use the save method. Now, save is actually just a higher level method. All it does is look to see if the object that we're inserting already has an _ID field, which is the primary key in a MongoDB document. We'll be looking at these in a second and then discussing them more in the next screencast. But if it already has one of those, it knows that this has been saved to the database before, and then it uses the collection.update method. However, if it doesn't see an _ID field, which it won't for this document, it will delegate to the insert method. So let's go ahead and use save, and we'll just pass in that document, and nothing shows up, so that means we have no errors. So now, let's go ahead and run db.links.find. This is the method that we use to query the database for documents. We're going to talk about querying in several videos a bit later on, but right now, just using the find method with no parameters will just return all of the documents that are in our current collection. So that doesn't actually look too pretty, so let me do document.find.forEach, and I'm going to pass them to the print.json method. This is just a built-in method that will print our documents nicely. So as you can see here, we have all of the data in our documents just as we put it in. But notice that they now have an _ID field with this object ID. This is the unique ID that MongoDB gives each one of our documents. And we're going to talk about that more in the next video. But right now, that's pretty much all you're going to need to know about inserting documents. It's really, really simple to just create a JSON object and then use the insert method. It doesn't get any more complex than that. Now you might say, well, what if I want to have some kind of validation or confirmation that certain fields do exist in the document, that kind of thing, before I actually put it into the database? Does MongoDB not give me anything to ensure the integrity of my data? And the truth is, no, it doesn't. And that's a feature of NoSQL databases. All that type of thing that a SQL database has built into the column definitions, we have to do ourselves in the regular programming. Now, of course, this does require us to be a little bit more vigilant when we're actually writing our code to work with the MongoDB database, but I think it gives us a nice degree of control that I think works well. So that's it for this video. In the next screencast, we're going to look into these object ID values a little bit more and see what they are and how IDs work in general with MongoDB.